Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 197. My name is NBZ and the crisis is over, Bally. Our long-standing disaster that Bally had the most powerful piece of hardware is finally over. We are finally no longer have to deal with the fact that Bally owns the most powerful piece of hardware on the podcast. My PC arrived after 109 working days. It's now in my possession, and I'm recording on it right now. This is the first podcast. I'm christening this PC with this first podcast we're recording, episode 197. Put it in the history books. Awesome. Put it on the TNL quiz whenever that happens of the law. You've got to get the law right.
I'm going to do that one day. I'm going to do a TNL quiz.
Yeah, sure. All the history of the podcast and see how much anyone remembers about it. So yeah. Anyway, hi, I'm NBZ. I'm happy. I'm very happy. Bally, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm getting very, very excited about E3. I think last year was a bit of a damp squib all around. There were some very good individual presentations for sure, but more so I would argue with Sony in particular. So this year I do think we don't know anything about Sony, and I think Nintendo have a lot of big moves to make.
Yeah, and they are doing one, and they have talked about it now, which is good. So we have confirmation, and I'm sure we'll be chatting about that. And we will be, of course, talking about it when it happens, which will be on the 15th of June, Tuesday the 15th, as is their quote-unquote usual slot. And
5 p.m. British Summer Time, 9 a.m. Pacific.
Exactly. So as our usual kind of plan goes with E3, is we will watch it, probably watch a bunch of Treehouse stuff. I would like to take in as much of that Treehouse stuff as possible, and then record it, and then pop it into your feeds ASAP, so that we could have a good chat about all the Nintendo goings-on at the show. But yeah, looking forward to that. But Bally, we're here to talk about things today on this show, so what are we talking about?
Today, for the first segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing, and then for the second segment, we are going to do some E3 predictions. We didn't do any last year. It was a shame. It was a sad time, but they are back. So we are going to do 3 sort of more realistic ones each, and then 1 slightly wilder one each.
Yeah, and we've got some of yours in there as well, so we'll take some predictions that you have sent to us too. But let's get into it, Bal. Let's talk about video games, what we've been playing. And we have both played a game, an interesting one, that is not on Switch, but is the most, why is this not on Switch game I've maybe played this year? And that is The Wild at Heart, a game that is, in many ways, what you could call an indie Pikmin, right? Like in the same way that Wargroove is indie Advance Wars and Golf Story is indie Mario Golf. This really is Pikmin in many different ways. So yeah, The Wild at Heart, we both played it through Game Pass, and in its art style and its look and everything, it seems like it should be on Switch, and I'm not sure why it isn't. There must be some deal that Microsoft have made.
They've clearly done some Microsoft Xbox deal because it's not on PlayStation either. It's purely Xbox, PC, and Game Pass, and it definitely feels like it will come to Switch, although my Xbox One did have a lot of issues running this game. It was
definitely needs a bit of optimization. Yeah. Even my PC at points was having struggling issues in certain areas of the game where started tanking the frame rate a bit, and I'm like, oof, this shouldn't be running this poorly for what type of game this is. But
I did do an update when I was about halfway through the game. One came out and it helped a bit, but then there were still some issues. I had a lot of issues where sound was gradually cutting out to the point of complete silence.
Oh no.
And I had to reboot the game. And then just some really janky pausing and freezing that I'd have to use the home menu to pause out of and then go back in, and just kind of not great stuff. But I do think this can be optimized better, and I do think it would be able to run on Switch if they just gave it a good fiddle.
Yeah. So, Bally, do you want to set this up, what this game is about, and kind of the kind of similarities it shares with Pikmin?
You play as a character called Wake, or Wake.
Wake. I don't think he's called Wake.
But it's weird because the first thing you do, like many games, you wake up from a bed, and it's the way that the text on the screen, it has the character's name on the left, and then a line, and then what they say on the right. And I was like, Right, Wake. So does it say your action or something when you when you're doing?
You
something?
just got very confused.
Yeah. So you had shown me a trailer for this game, and I thought, oh, it looks like a more kind of story-driven Pikmin. Like, but then the more I got into it, I realized, yeah, it does have a bit more story than Pikmin, which isn't saying a lot because Pikmin barely has any story. But
yeah.
like, the mechanics kind of overtake the story in a meaningful way where you're thinking much less about the story. Like, and I should say, like, Wake is clear, like, he lives with his father, he has no mother, and like, it's clear the father is like an alcoholic or clearly drinks a lot and isn't they don't have the best of relationships. So Wake is kind of like escaping. It's like is that kind of sense of escapism and escaping to this mystical forest with these things called sprites, which are very similar to Pikmin.
Spritelings, I think.
Spritelings, right?
Yeah.
And then your friend Kirby comes along, and then there's all sorts of mechanics with Kirby as well, and yeah, it's a really chill vibes game, and
I love the art. It is so
really
gorgeous,
cool.
and it for me it is similar to a game called Knights and Bikes. If people have seen that game, it has a very similar vibe. Also, kind of riffing on the Double Fine art style. If you think about Costume Quest, it feels like a 2D Costume Quest in some ways, but
especially like proportions wise.
Yes,
style
totally.
wise, I thought it looked a lot like Carto. It almost looked like this paper like look.
There's a little bit of that, yeah. But it definitely hews much closer to that sort of Double Fine-y sort of Knights and Bikes-esque aesthetic, which is to say it's not necessarily top down. It's kind of like it is and it isn't, right? Like the way you traverse the map is in a 2D perspective, but there are like things in the distance and things like that. It is almost like isometric but flat, which is a weird, there's like kind of
two maybe things in the whole game that are kind of like 3D rendered in a weird way. There's like one friendly character you meet.
Yeah, the one who plays the flute.
Right, yeah, he's like 3D. It's like, this is weird, like just to look at. But
and I wonder if any of those other character models are that, because I know, for example, like in the Ori games, main characters are modeled as 3D characters, and it's more obvious. You can tell it more obviously in the second game, but they are actually like 3D models on a background, even though they are kind of painted in a way to make them look two-dimensional. Right. I think this game does that quite a lot as well. So maybe they are, but we don't even notice just because the job is so well done with it. So.
Yeah. So like, I think that like it's a good length. Like I enjoyed the length of this game. I thought like you've got this initial stage where you're kind of discovering the world, but then the game like gets bigger and there's these other areas that you get to with new spriteling types. And I think the range on spriteling types I actually really liked in the end, because at the start I thought, right, they're literally just copying the Pikmin types, and I would argue that, for example, the fire type spriteling is very similar to Pikmin. It's red, it's resistant to fire, and it's also a bit more powerful. It's also one of the more common types as well, just like Pikmin. But then this game, I think, does some cool things with like ice types, and then my favorite is probably like this type that they're basically like moon spritelings, and they become 3 times more powerful at night, which I think is just an awesome idea. And that's one thing I think this game does where, sure, it is copy and pasted Pikmin to a degree, but it does have enough new ideas where it really does feel like an indie take on Pikmin. And I think that having a lot more emphasis on the day and night cycle, and like when I say day and night cycle, like you can actually go about and do stuff at night and enemies will come and hurt you, but you can still do it. And one of the cool things about these moon spritelings is they can take on the enemies that fight you at night, and they are obviously 3 times more powerful at night. So you can like do stuff like move extra heavy boulders and this sort of thing. And I think that's a really cool mechanic where I think Pikmin, the emphasis is when dusk comes, you have to go away. You have to go away overnight. Otherwise, anyone left out is completely obliterated, and it's like a race against time. And you still have that for the majority of this game, but I love that they do something that changes that idea slightly.
Yeah, I wish there was a little bit more tutorialization or direct like remembrance to the player that there are some of those abilities per spriteling, just because I did get to the point where I was like, oh, I need 70 to lift this boulder. I only have 55 now. Do I have to go and grind out all of these you collect kind of juice, as it were, like kind of ethereal like little bits of dust that you suck in with your vacuum, which we can talk about the vacuum as well, but and then you use that for upgrades, right? So you can increase the capacity of the number of spritlings you can carry. And I was like, this boulder at 70, how am I going to get past that? And I had to look up a walkthrough, and then I realized, wait, this person is using the lunar ones, and then I tried using them, and it didn't do anything. And then I realized, oh wait, it's nighttime, and then they're more powerful, and I hadn't clocked it basically. So I got frustrated at that point.
In defense of the game, there's a sign next to that boulder that says, like, lunar sprites are more powerful at nighttime, and also the boulder itself has like lots of little crescent moons on it.
Oh, does it? Okay, yeah.
But I agree. I think this game, is a little bit guilty of taking for granted that you've played a Pikmin game before, especially like near the start. And it's hard to look at this game through the prism of like having not played a Pikmin game, because obviously I have played Pikmin, but I don't think the game makes it overly clear. Like, you need to, farm more spritlings. You need to use them to get these items back to your base. Like, it does tell you all these things. I don't think it sometimes makes it quite as clear as it needs to be.
There are definitely moments that were like in the latter half of the game for me that were more frustrating than enjoyable on that level, and not necessarily that I didn't understand the mechanics, but there is some clarity stuff, right? Like the mud that you can walk through. Your characters can walk through that and walk onto it, even if the background doesn't necessarily look like you can actually walk directly onto it. You can, but then if your spritlings follow you onto it, they die instantly in that mud, and so you have to be careful.
See, I thought it was acid.
But, I didn't know what it was. I just assumed it because it was brown. I was like, this is kind of mud stuff. And so sometimes you walk off it or walk onto it, and the spritlings will stay off the side, and they'll just do question marks and be like, where did you go? And then sometimes I walked onto it and they would just follow me onto it and die. And there was a little, I think it shows how difficult it is to make one of these types of games, and why it's only Nintendo that really attempts to do it, is that the AI on...
And even Pikmin, I think, has that issue occasionally where they will follow you when you don't mean them to.
It does, right. Where like one will get left behind somewhere and you have to go back and find where they are, and they got stuck behind a boulder because the pathing got messed up. And like that is very clearly an issue here as well. But without the same level of polish that Nintendo have, I think it sometimes rubs a little rougher in that sense.
Also, this game has the option where... So there was one area where I'd throw them and they wouldn't come back, and they were literally stuck there. And like day and night would pass and I couldn't get them back. And then there's actually a button you can press in your camp that will like retrieve them back into your thing. Like any stuck spritlings, they've got a word for it in this game, but like they can come back, and so they accept that they've not made a foolproof game, and that you can get them.
There was one part where I was trying to get them onto a platform, and there was a tiny gap between the platform, the edge where I was standing on, and water underneath, and I just dumped a bunch into the water, and I'm like, well, I can't vacuum them back up to me because they're on the wrong level. They're not dead, they're just floating in this water, but I just can't access them. And that's the kind of finicky thing that I'm talking about, of like, it's not quite all the way there in terms of the polish, even though I think overall it's a really well-made game and looks really fantastic and feels good as well, right? We talked about, I was going to mention the vacuum, but that's kind of your main mode of getting your Pikmin or your spritlings back to you. It's like, it's such a direct parallel. It's like, come on, just might as well call them Pikmin. When you throw them somewhere, you can then there's two levels to your vacuum, and then Kirby has a different item that works similarly, but is like used to open different paths and that type of thing. It's like a light beam that shines and opens things and stuns things. But it's really convenient to like throw your spritlings and then use the double vacuum thing to get them back to you, so that
it feels really good. And generally works well, apart from, as you say, there's a few spots where they can just almost like hit like a black spot where they just can't recover, which can be frustrating.
And I don't want to like overblow that, because I think that is kind of few and far between, but there's certainly like later game moments where it can get a little finicky with that type of stuff. But generally I think the puzzle design is really good, and there are places where you have to split up between Kirby going on one thing, because Kirby is small, and so they can go through little log holes that are peppered throughout the world, and those are kind of parts where you can go through it, but you can't take your spritlings with you. So it's kind of figuring out, okay, I need to get up here with Kirby, but then I need Spritelings to do this thing. How do I get Spritelings to Kirby from Wake, right? And so it's that constant puzzle of moving people onto switches and then, you know, switching back and forth between the two characters, while also all the time being worried about nighttime, because the other thing about nighttime is that there's this evil force called the Never that keeps coming for you and is terrifying, and the music is really creepy when nighttime starts coming. And so I was, every time it started to become night as the sun was going down, I was always like put in a mood of like, oh, I need to get back to camp. This is tense.
And there's quite a few areas in the game where you can jump down into the next area, and then you basically have to solve a puzzle to get back to camp.
Yes.
And there were a couple of times where I was like racing against time like mad, and the Never would come. And like I said, once you get the moon Spritelings, and I got them, they were the first ones I got of like the 3 extra types. So there were occasionally times where night would happen, the Never would come after me, and I'd use the moon Spritelings to just like kill the Never. But then like more Never would come back, like they keep respawning, so like it's not a foolproof idea. So yeah, the game like purposefully, in my view, sets you up to fail a few times where it's like, right, this is a dead end until you solve this puzzle. You can't get back to camp, or you're going to have to stay out here and survive. And I like that. Like, that's nice.
I definitely had that. Yeah, I definitely had that happen to me a few times, and it is a tense situation. Like, you definitely feel, because the other panic is, oh God, I'm going to lose all of my Spritelings, right? And certainly there are moments. There was one time when I was like sucking them all back towards me, and it was slightly off, and they just all fell in the mud and drowned and died instantly. And that feels really bad. Thankfully, it is easy enough to get them back again, and you can buy more as well at the kind of central hub area where there are some characters that you can do stuff for. You can find secret cats that you can give to this cat lady and buy stuff at her shop and that type of thing, which I didn't engage a huge amount with because I didn't really feel it was necessary. I was often at times picking up a lot of the scrap stuff in this game and then never using it, like putting it into my inventory, and then I didn't really upgrade a huge amount.
I didn't love the upgrade system.
No.
Mainly because it like, for everything you want to upgrade, it's required 2 different currencies. So one of the currencies is like the standard nuts and bolts, which you're picking up hundreds of all the time.
Yes.
But then you always need like these sort of seed bulb things in order to upgrade even like your health. So it's all gated behind essentially getting these individual seed bulb things, which there are like hardly any of in the game. So
and I found the weird thing is like, your own character's health doesn't really factor in that much. The only time I found it important was the last boss. That was it. Like, the rest of the time...
The Never really do target your character if you do get in a pickle, I find. Like,
yeah, maybe I didn't encounter the Never enough in that case, because I never found any reason to really upgrade my character's health, so I was never that invested in the upgrade system in the first place. And especially with a game like this, where the whole purpose of it is to stand back and throw your guys to do the work for you, right? Like, usually you are out of danger just because you are further away from the enemies and that type of thing. So yeah, I found it was a little of a weird upgrade system. But and the other neat thing is past a certain point you can go in any order. So you said you went and got those kind of moon guys, the Lunarlings.
Right, yeah.
I didn't get those until right at the end of the game, right? Because I did in the opposite order to you, and I think you did that area first. I did it last. So it's cool that they kind of open things up to that point. In some ways, it can get a little hard to navigate. I know we both got stuck at a point of like, oh, where do we need to go next? How do I get past here? Do I need a certain number of Spritelings to move this boulder? And
there's some tricky puzzles in there for sure. And just kind of understanding what to do sometimes. But I don't think the game is too hard. I think it generally plays that balance really well. I don't think the game is too challenging from like an action perspective. I think the final boss is kind of like what you kind of would expect a kind of Pikmin style game to go with for a final boss. And unlike Nintendo's Pikmin, there's not like lots of bosses. There's certainly some tough enemies in the game, and I like that about it.
Right, there's some big like rock guys who throw stuff at you.
Really
and they
messed me up a few times.
Yeah, there's definitely like a strategy I found of like throwing them in there and then just vacuuming them back for a while and then running away for a while, and it kind of almost resets their health or whatever that is, right? So that you can throw them back in without reprieve, and that kind of became a strategy of mine. So yeah, it is fun to throw them. I think the aiming can be a little finicky at points, but I think generally once you have them, you can split between them easily. It's easy to switch from one to the other. They have a good sorting system, I found, and so you don't really get too messed up between what types.
That stuff is solid, and you can get them like pick up items, drop items, put them back to camp for when your own inventory is too full. There's neat mechanics like that. I think there's generally enough there that does feel different to Pikmin, which I think is really nice. And I didn't even know I wanted an indie Pikmin. It wasn't ever on my list of something I really wanted, and it's a really nice surprise that this game sort of came along. You just kind of like sent me a trailer and said, "Hey, this is out on Game Pass today." I'm like, "Out on Game Pass today? This looks cool. I'm going to try it. Like, I have nothing to lose." So,
and I actually sent you that trailer having not watched it myself and just seen screenshots on Twitter and people like Neil from NWR talking about it. And I didn't actually realize it was a Pikmin game. I was like, "Oh, this looks like Knights and Bikes. It's probably like an adventure style narrative game."
That's what I thought it was as well for most of the trailer. And then I saw a few. The Pikmin don't really dominate the trailer. And then it wasn't until I was about an hour or two into the game I was like, "Okay, this is like an entirely Pikmin style game."
Yeah, it's
more so than I realized. So yeah, I thought it was like going to be a 5-hour kind of adventure game with maybe some Pikmin elements, but it's a full-on Pikmin game, and there are very minor adventure elements in that traditional sense.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we both like it quite a bit. There's definitely issues with it, and I had frustrations with it here and there, but generally, I think this is a really cool game, and one that kind of came out of nowhere that I am kind of really happy to have played this year. So
and I'm fairly confident it'll come to Switch, and hopefully
it must do, right? By the end of the year,
yeah.
you gotta imagine.
Yeah, and
it would do really well there. So.
Yeah, and hopefully it's not one of those awkward like 24 quid, indie games. I think this is a good 16, 18 quid game, hopefully.
I think it is 25 on Xbox, $25 at least.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Is like, I think Game Pass has really skewed our sense of value, which is a tricky thing. Yeah. And I do think there's lots of indie games that are kind of slowly going up in price as people start to value them a bit more and feel like, people are willing to pay for experiences like this, And it's not like it's short, like it is pretty meaty. It's a good 10, 11 hour game, Like there's definitely a lot to do there, and there's more to do if you wanted it. So I recommend people check this out if they can, and if not, I'm sure it will be out later this year on Nintendo. Maybe the Switch Pro can help it out in that case, So
yeah, The Wild at Heart, cool little name.
Wild at Heart. I think that's the name of a TV show my sister used to watch about the Australian outback. I feel like that's a thing.
Okay. I think it might just be Wild at Heart.
Yeah, maybe that is the name of that show. I'm not sure, but I just remember my sister watched it all the time.
Like I hear there's some website called Nintendo Life, but we're this Nintendo
Life.
No, like
that's totally different. That's nothing to do with us. Please don't sue us. Anyway, moving swiftly on, I have finished the second Famicom Detective Club game, The Girl Who Stands Behind. Ooh, spooky. So, Bally, you were asking me before the podcast, what is this game compared to the other one?
Only because RFN talked about it. So one's a prequel that came out after, I believe, a bit like episode 1, right?
Yes. So the first game, The Missing Heir, came out first, and then this game came out, but it is a prequel to that game, but it came out after. So chronologically, it is narratively before the first game. However, in terms of its style and the way it is presented, I feel like it's a bit of a step up from that game, just because it feels like they learned stuff from the first one and implemented it in this, which I didn't necessarily expect there to be that big of a difference between the two, and I still don't think there's a massive difference. But in terms of the production value and some of the kind of more custom animation stuff going on in this game, it feels like there is more going on with this than the previous one, right? Like in the previous game, when you were talking to somebody, they would just be standing there, static background, not much going on. Whereas more in this game, it happens that like you're standing there with someone and a car drives by in the background, like little animation of it, and it looks really nice because the style is so popping. That subtle stuff works super well. Like talking to someone outside the front of this school, and there's someone in the back like opening a locker and then like walking away in the background. That kind of subtle additional animation is a bit more prevalent here. So it feels like, and the interesting part is that this game was remade for the Super Nintendo. So it feels like not only was it a iteration on the first Famicom game, but then it was put out on the next system as well as a remake, and so it had even more of a chance for them to add flourish to it. And then this remake adds, a further chance to do that. So in that sense, I think it's kind of cool that it has an additional layer of polish, and it feels like the writing is a little bit better as well, and a bit more tight and that type of stuff. However, the game remains quite similar in terms of its approach, which is similar stuff I talked about last time, which is talk to people, figure out what you have to do, and go around this school, because this one revolves another murder mystery around a thing in the school that people call the girl who stands behind. That people think there's this girl who's like covered in blood, who whenever you're alone in the school, or sometimes out the corner of your eye, you might see this girl who stands behind.
Dark enough.
It is dark, and I definitely talked a little bit about this last time, but these games, shockingly, are some of the most grisly Nintendo experiences I have ever had. Not only with I think the atmosphere is really great.
It's a low bar, but yes.
You're right, yes, of course. There's like they steer away from anything realistic and bloody and death and that type of thing generally. There's a shot in the first game where a man is hanging from a tree, dead, just like full force, and you just see his entire body zoomed in on his head with a rope around his neck, just like he's out, and he has seemingly committed suicide, and it's just there in a Nintendo game, and that shocked me. And then there's shit in this game which is even worse than that, and it also adds that kind of eerie atmosphere. The music in these games is really good, actually. They've done such a good job of remastering them, and I really like the soundtracks to both of them. But there are certain areas in the school that you go to where sometimes it'll be like dark at night, and the music will be very atmospheric and kind of creepy, and you will feel uncomfortable. Even though it is a visual novel style thing, or like an adventure game, it unsettles you, definitely puts you on guard. And there were moments where I'm playing at night where I'm like, I don't feel great playing this game right now. As we all know, we are both massive scaredy cats. And I don't want to stress it. I don't think it's like ridiculously terrifying, but it's definitely a sense of unease, and the game does a really good job of painting that, as well as like some of the character facial animations, which feel again another bit of a step up from the last game. Animation continues to be fantastic, but some of the times in which characters get enraged or break down, it reminds me of in Phoenix Wright games, where you have the person on the stand who you figure out is the culprit, and they are just going into their meltdown mode, like those crazy animations where they just fucking melt down on the stand, and their eyes are popping out and their face just does crazy shit. That happens quite a few times in this game as well, and I really appreciate it. On the less good side, I think this kind of applies to both of these games. The middle chapters feel like they're both stalling and also contain the most frustrating and baffling stuff in the game, in terms of, okay, I don't know what the fuck to do. I'm just clicking on this stuff a million times. What's the thing I'm supposed to do in this situation? There's one moment where this guy pulled you over. He's like a bully type guy, or seems like it. And he's like, hey, bud, don't walk away from me. And you can't walk away from him. There's no way to. And every time you talk to him, he's like, hey, stop looking at me weird. And you're like, what am I supposed to do? None of these options are working. I've looked at him by using the eyeglass, and looked at everything else, talked to him a million times. Turns out I need to look at his face, which then triggers my character to say, oh, he doesn't have any eyebrows, you look weird. And then my character calls him weird, which then makes him angry enough to do something, and then triggers the next thing to happen. And I'm like, fucking come on, video game. Just like, it's like a level of obscurity that goes beyond what the kind of base mechanics of the game should be. Because in a game like Phoenix Wright, when you're scanning the background, every individual aspect that you're looking at will be highlighted as a different thing, right?
Yeah.
But when you're scanning a body in this game, it's just one thing, and it just says this person, just says their name. But in certain scenarios, you have to click on a certain part of their body in order to do something, in order to trigger something. And in that case, it just wasn't clear at all. And so, yeah, that happens a few times. And I think there are moments of like, okay, so I'm in the faculty lounge again, and there's no information being given to me here. This is clearly like it feels like an old school adventure game thing of like, I don't know what the logic is here. This just feels like a time waster, and it's just making me sit here while I figure out a thing just because they wanted to elongate the length of time this game is going to go on for. And that happens, I think, a little too much throughout the center of the game. I feel like I bared with it more in the first one because it was more novel and things were different. But having played both of them now, it just kind of dragged a little bit more than I wanted it to. And that's not to say it's not worth playing, because I think it still is. And overall, I probably say this is the stronger game of the two. The mystery it's got level of tension and intrigue to it, as well as the kind of atmospheric stuff I was talking about. And generally, like, I think the conversations flow better. I think the writing's a little sharper. But it does have that level of frustration, which is hard to get over. And ultimately, I think, the best thing to do is just go to a guide and just say fuck it, because you're not really going to get much out of just clicking randomly. You're just going to waste time, and I don't think it's that worthwhile.
No matter how long I play games, though, there's always part of me whenever I go to a guide that I shouldn't feel this way, but I'm always a bit like, it would have been nice if I could have just done this without.
Right, you feel defeated, right?
Yeah, and that scales massively depending on the game. Like, there are some mechanics, and this sounds like one of them, where you just think, I would have never have got this, and you definitely feel less guilty by going to a guy, but you still have that little bit of, I wish I could have just got over the hill.
I didn't have that at all with this game, frankly. I was just like, no, just tell me what to do here. But that's the thing, like, I think both of these games, and this one especially, starts super strong and, like, really fluid, and, like, you don't have a lot of friction points at the beginning, and then ends really strong as well, because the mystery wraps up, everything unravels, and you kind of see the entire thing for what it is, and it's great. And there's, like, a moment at the end of this game that's, like, fucking terrifying. Like, I'm not going to say what it is, but there's a thing on screen that I've never seen in a Nintendo game before rendered in the way that it is. And it's like, Jesus, dude, they fucking went in on this. So I really appreciate those aspects to it. And I think these games are definitely like more historical curiosity than modern game that anyone can play in year 2021. But I really enjoyed playing both of them, and despite their flaws, despite the things that were frustrations and friction points, they are really cool pieces of history. And I just wish there'd been like some tightening up of things, right? Like, as a remake, for example, when you talk to somebody, you question them and there's a list of stuff, right? And you're like, okay, let's ask about this. After they've spoken to you, it then takes you back to the menu that says talk again. So you need to open the talk menu again, scroll down one to press the next thing. Ideally, the game would just go back to the talk menu because it knows you want to ask another question again, and then you can just press the down button once to go back. This is a very fucking Joseph Addison style thing, but let me assure you, the amount of fucking talking you do in this game, every time you're talking to someone, talk, then go down to the thing, then press it, as opposed to keeping you in the talk menu after they've said a thing so you can respond with the next thing quickly. It's those tiny little friction points that add up to make this like, well, Nintendo, I feel like, yes, you want to be true to what the original game was, but that's one of those things that I think you could have just gotten away with, and not needed to keep so slavish in that way. So yeah, good fun, creepy, and if you want to check one of these out, I'd say maybe this one actually works a bit better. There are certainly
the girl behind. What's it called? The girl who stands behind.
Who stands. If you're in Europe, you can't buy them separately. They come as one. They're one package, so you will get both no matter what. If you're in the US, you can buy them separately. I think you can play them in either order. Ayumi, yes, is the character who's in both of them. She is definitely more present in this one because she's a schoolgirl at the school, and so she is more involved in the mystery, and she is more of a constant as you're wandering around, as opposed to being the thing at the end of the day. Like, the person at the end of the day is your detective guy, who's not really, he doesn't appear in person in the first game, and so it's interesting to see him, but he feels very tertiary, not really involved that much, and for the most part you come back to the office every day and he's not even there, and you're like, well, okay, I guess I'll speculate about the mystery on my own then. And Ayumi is good in this game, and definitely serves a bit more of the role that I wanted wanted her to in the first one, which was like as a companion, and it's not exactly that, but she's definitely more present, which is nice. So yeah, I'd check these out again, as I mentioned last time, if you are so inclined. But I'm very glad I've played them both now, so ticked them off the list. There you go, Nintendo history in the bag. All right, well, that is going to close us out for this part of the show, but don't go anywhere. We will be back after this break talking about E3, Nintendo, predictions, and what we think is going to happen. See you in a bit. All right, folks, welcome back to the final part of today's show. Nintendo, Bally, just really nice for once in our lives, decided on the day we're recording this to announce that they are doing E3. In fact, obviously we knew that before because it had been announced by the ESA that Nintendo were going to be one of their partner companies, and we just assumed that meant, well, they'll probably do their regular slot on Tuesday. And what do you know, Bally? They're doing their regular slot on Tuesday, as if 2020 never happened, just not missing any beats. They are going to have a Nintendo Direct with 40 minutes of hot content in there, showing off all the video games that they have to come out. And they mentioned like mostly 2021, which, as we know, basically means that like there'll be 3 2021 things and the rest will be further out because they always lie, because they're lying liars with big long noses.
They also said they're going to focus on software. So
yes, of course. And I mean, I think that was pretty obvious for people who follow Nintendo for a long time. It's been forever since they have shown hardware at E3 that is iterative in the same way that this would be. So it makes pretty much no sense that they would be doing that, and they seem like they just wanted to clarify that. It's almost like Nintendo are like talking directly to the internet, being like, "Hey guys, we know you're talking about these rumors right now, and we're not gonna acknowledge the rumors. We're just gonna subtly nod that there's not going to be any hardware reveals at this show, just because we know what the internet is like." So yes. How are you feeling, Bal? Are you excited? We've only had one Nintendo Direct so far this year. It was the first one in a while. Got some good stuff from it, obviously. The Famicom Detective Club and Mario Golf, Skyward Sword HD. Are your kind of barrels loaded for expectations when it comes to the rest of this year and what they have to show?
Yeah, I think they are quite high for a number of reasons. One, they didn't really do anything formal last year. It was a series of smaller things later in the year, and later in the summer, I should say. And so it kind of feels in that sense like we're kind of due, like, some bigger stuff. I think I'm also excited because obviously, Breath of the Wild 2 is in the works. We can get to it, but it's, there's like a strong chance we'll see more of that. And that's always exciting when 3D Zelda's in the pipeline. So yeah, it feels like they're due on a lot of exciting things. And I think that just and combined with these Switch Pro rumors, I think the whole shebang combined together, it's got a lot of potential this year, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think that we will be seeing, hopefully, quite a few new reveals. Maybe some, looking at things that have been announced previously that we'll get teasers for. I wonder if they feel brave enough to tease Metro Prime 4, possibly. We'll get into those things as well. But there's definitely like Bayonetta and Breath of the Wild and No More Heroes and some known quantities that we are still quite unknown about, right? Which continue to be listed in Nintendo's plans of like, yes, TBA still on all these games that have been TBA for a very long time and will probably continue to be for a little bit longer. But it feels like they've had a bit of more time now. It's been over a year and a half-ish since, well, maybe a little less than that, since the COVID stuff affected all of their plans and their development. So feels like they could have straightened the course a little bit more by this point in time, which means that I feel like we're probably going to be due for some exciting stuff. And I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. It feels not like a really 3, but it feels more so than it did last year. It feels
definitely.
We're going to get a whole weekend of stuff. Microsoft thing is going to be on the 13th, and this will be on the 15th. So it's not all like it's not like in the days where we had 4 back-to-back press conferences on the Monday, and that was good times. And everyone would sit through EA just because they wanted to get to the rest of the stuff, and it was all great, but we are still getting stuff that is a bit more condensed than what we usually get, which is nice. Great. Well, the whole point of this segment, Bally, is to talk about predictions for E3 2021 as it concerns Nintendo. So let's lay out the ground rules. What are we going to be doing with our predictions this year?
We are going to be doing 3 slightly more realistic predictions, which are never end up being realistic at all in any case. And then we're going to do 1 slightly more out there, outlandish, less likely to happen, wild prediction. And then we've got a few predictions in from listeners who've written in kindly. So we're going to check in with some of those and have a bit more of a general discussion at the end.
Okay. It sounds good to me. And we didn't do it last year, of course, because there was no Nintendo E3. But yes, we returned to the classic format. So, Bally, who wants to go first? It's time to just dig in for our predictions. I'm going to leave the floor open to you if you would like to fill it.
I'm going to start with 2D Metroid. So,
okay.
Yes, I think Mercury Steam are probably working on a new 2D Metroid, but I actually think that game is probably not going to be revealed and might be next year or later than that. And I think Nintendo think they're onto a good thing with these remakes. And I actually think Grezzo, and despite the fact they've released a game this year, I'll come to that. I think Grezzo is going to be working on a Super Metroid remake.
Oh.
And not only that, I think they're going to stick with a chibi art style like they did with Link's Awakening. And this is Nintendo's way of being like, we want all of our games to appeal to as wide an audience as possible, and why don't we get those youngsters in on a bit of Metroid who might be otherwise intimidated by the dark aliens and shooting and all these things. And we are going to see full-on Chibi Samus, Chibi Ridley. It's all in this game. It's going to be fantastic.
But here's the real question, Bally. Will there be glitter in this Metroid? That's the real question.
Glitter?
Yes, glitter. Will Guillaume's prediction from RFN of Glitter Metroid finally rear his head? I like this thought, right, of using the chibi art style from Link's Awakening in Super Metroid. That's actually kind of appealing in a weird way. I don't know. I'm confident they can make it still feel a bit dark and foreboding, and that feeling of solitude that you have in Super Metroid, while at the same time it can be very cute and chibi and look like a little clockwork toy at the same time. I do believe it's possible to get the fine balance between the two. I don't know. Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
And here's so I know you're concerned. You're thinking, Bally, Grezzo just put out, what's it called this year? Metopia this year.
Yes.
Like, there's no way this is going to turn around. So this is my timescale for this game. I think this will come out in the end of this financial year. So this is like a spring 2022 game.
Okay.
And the fact that Grezzo released Luigi's Mansion remake in 2018, followed by in the very next year, the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening remake, makes me think that they can do this. Like, this is possible. This is doable. They're not one sole small team. It's actually possible to work on multiple things. I'm looking at the number of employees on Wikipedia. Apparently it's 80 people according to 2021, which doesn't strike a lot of confidence in the size, but I believe it is possible that they can turn this around for March 2022. So.
Right, and we are talking about like regular remakes when it comes to stuff like Metopia and Luigi's Mansion.
Right, but exactly. There's all remakes, and similar to Link's Awakening, people are going to play this game and think that it feels really dated, but it will look brand new, obviously. Like, it's going to be really weird in that sense.
Do you think the discourse will suddenly sprout up for all these people who've never played Super Metroid, being like, actually this game hasn't aged amazingly? I wonder if that raises its head, because I think there are ways. I think for me personally, the biggest way in which Super Metroid hasn't aged is its controls. I don't like the way Super Metroid controls. It's not as snappy or as fluid as the GBA Metroid games, which is where I think the peak of the series is in terms of movement and fluidity, especially with stuff like switching between bombs and switching your grapple hook and that type of stuff, like pressing the select button, super clunky. So some of the UI and menu stuff is clunky. Some of the movement I feel is clunky. But when it comes down to like world design and a space to explore, I think it's kind of timeless, that game still. It's remarkably well designed as a place, and iconic fights against these bosses, and the world and the music, all that stuff is still so good. So
it's a really great game. I think it was like one of the first ones I played, and it was a really early podcast game, and I loved it at the time. I probably owe it to the game to play it again. And hey, I do think a remake will be coming for this game, even if my prediction is false. I think a Super Metroid remake is going to happen at some point.
I think it is one of those games in Nintendo's catalog that really deserves a remake. I think it's up there for me in terms of which ones should come back, should be given a remake. I think Zelda 2 is more in need of a remake. I don't want to play Zelda 2. I'd much rather that got fully redone. But Super Metroid is a game that I respect so much that I think it is worthy of having one,
Right.
So that more people can understand how good it is. So yeah, that makes sense. And again, thinking about the timeline of, okay, so they worked on a lesser remaster with Miitopia, therefore this is more of a full ground up remake. I think it makes sense from your pitch there, so I'll go along with that. However, Bally, of course, you know that I always have to have a 2D Metro prediction, and so I'm going to go exactly against everything you just said. And I'm going to tell you that yes, Mercury Steam are working on another 2D Metroid, and yes, it will come out this year, and it will be called Metroid Visions. Now, here's the kicker. The V is very important, Bally, because as we all know, when we all booted up Metroid Fusion back in the day, what did it say at the start of that game? It said Metroid 4. Now, no one ever talks about this. Metroid 4, that is canonically the number that it is in terms of the 2D series. We've not gone beyond it in the timeline, man. Every game since, the Prime series, all that stuff, timeline-wise, Other M, that is all pre-Fusion. Fusion is the furthest point we are at this point, which means that the V, of course, as everyone knows, Roman numeral for 5. Metroid 5 V Visions. Now here's the thread I'm pulling on.
Going for the whole Resident Evil thing here.
Absolutely. Just taking on Capcom's ideas. That's Nintendo love to do it. Pull on this little thread from Metroid Samus Returns. There's a bit of Chozo stuff going on in there, right? She gets to the planet and I think I can't remember if it's a post-game thing or a credits thing, but I remember there being stuff about the history of the Chozo and what was going on with those people, and it sets up stuff interesting stuff about what the war was happening with the Chozo and that type of stuff. And I know they teased the fusion thing at the end of Metro Samus Returns, and let's be honest, that's probably the more likely prediction, but that's fucking boring, so I'm not doing that. Here's the thing, Bally. Visions is going to be a 2D side-scrolling brand new Metroid adventure. However, dual protagonist. You will be playing Samus in the present. You will also be playing as a Chozo in the past. And you will find out about the past history of the Chozo through this character. Samus will be uncovering old Chozo ruins and artifacts, and it will be switching between as she has visions of the past of the Chozo.
Nintendo do love the whole switching between thing.
They do, yeah.
That's an interesting one. Cool.
So it could be the same space, right? That time has changed, and so routes are different and things like that. Alternatively, it could be separate, individual flashback moments that you play a set story sequence of as the Chozo, and then flip back to Samus. I'm not sure exactly how it would work, but the idea came to, this is all born of the idea of Metroid 5 V. Well, what can I do with V? Visions. There we go. That makes sense. So it's all just kind of me pulling at a thread. But I think this idea, right, of having a Metroid game where you play as someone other than Samus is interesting. But I do think that...
we've already had that with Metroid Prime Federation Force, of course.
Well, of course, yeah. We
to glowing praise. People loved not playing as Samus with that game.
Yeah, could you not also play as the bounty hunters in Prime Hunters in the multiplayer mode?
Yep,
I think.
good point. Yep.
Yeah. So there's been ways in which you can do that, but I think it's about time, man. You know, they've done remakes. Like and here's the thing, like. Theoretically, your Super Metroid thing probably makes more sense because it's the next up to be remade. If we're going down that line of they remade Metroid 1, they remade Metroid 2, time to remake the third Metroid game, and then Fusion would follow if Mercury Steam was to work on that. But you know, I've got to dream big, Bally. I've got to hope for the future. I've got to think about like what is exciting and new, and a brand new game is what I want. Really, like
I think we're going to get both in the next 3 years, and I don't know how close they might be together, but I do think we're on for a lot of 2D Metroid.
You hope, right?
I
like
hope.
that's the hope. But like
hope.
I don't know how well Samus Returns did. Like, did it do well? It was a late 3DS game, right? Were people buying it enough?
It's really hard to. You're right, because it's a late 3DS game. It's so hard to compare to like the current market in terms of like everyone's got a Switch, everyone's pumped, like everything is selling on Switch, and you know you would imagine this would sell fine, like 2-3 mil on Switch. Who knows? But
you would hope.
Yeah,
you would hope. But yeah, that's my idea. I hope it happens. Honestly, any kind of new 2D Metroid, whether it is a remake, whether it is just a game, I just want another one, man. Give me something else that I can fucking binge in 48-hour period and like do like an addiction thing like I did last time when Samus Returns came out. That was a wild fucking weekend. I absolutely just like basically swallowed my 3DS whole that weekend. It was absurd.
It was a really impressive game. I was really surprised how much I enjoyed that game, and that final boss destroyed my hands.
It's still probably like the lowest on my list of 2D Metroids, but I still just devoured it. It's just nothing like that series for me with Nintendo. So excited for more. But Bally, let's get into your second prediction.
Well, you were talking about switching between like this Chozo character and Samus. I'm going to do another switching prediction, and I'm going to link it to Breath of the Wild 2.
Alrighty.
I think that co-op gameplay will be revealed for Breath of the Wild 2. I know that others have this theory, but I just watched that trailer again and I thought they're like both dressed in blue. Like I think this is going to be obviously the reveal that Zelda is playable. I think you can intermittently swap between the two. I also think I have enough faith in Nintendo where they can both design a game that can be played co-op as well as single player. And what I mean by this is, so in an open world setting, obviously you're going to get to shrines or the equivalent, and you're going to have these co-op puzzles. And I think a bit like when you think of like Olimar and Pikmin swapping with like Louis or Brittany in like Pikmin 3 and stuff, and you're swapping between characters. I think they're gonna try and do that kind of puzzle for when you're playing single player. And then when you're in co-op, you're obviously moving independently. I also think that for things where you might both have to hit a button at the same time, Nintendo will make sure that on your controller, like you'll be able to control both characters at the same time for specific movements when it comes to pressing buttons or something. And I think that when you're in a more general open world environment, it'll be the ability to leave either Link or Zelda on the horse while you might go and explore. This kind of like think I have faith that they can do it. I don't think it's easy, and I don't think anyone's really successfully done what I'm suggesting before. But even when you go back to like Nintendo Zelda lineage, and you think of like they've done this a lot in dungeons, especially a game like Wind Waker, and those last two dungeons where you're like swapping using the songs to go between like Makar and Link and Medley and Link. So they've done this thing where you are solving puzzles through using two characters at the same time, and they've done that in like the handheld ones as well. I want to say like Spirit Tracks and stuff. So like they're gonna evolve that in a 3D setting, and it's not going to be easy. I think they will stick the landing. I still think this game will be very successful. Everyone will love it. But I think that that's what they're going to go for. I think we will see gameplay. And I think, just like my 2D Metroid prediction, I think both these games will be shown off more in depth in the Treehouse afterwards. And I also think that this game is going to come out probably... I'm going to go as late as summer 2022, and I'm going to say just before E3, so like that sort of early June, late May slot. It's not going to make this financial year.
So they're going to plan it for like end of May, but it will be delayed, basically.
Yeah. I think that's the most likely, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think that they have it in them to make a good co-op experience. Now, there's a few ways you can look at this, right? One way you can be like, oh yeah, Mario Odyssey. What was the oh yeah, someone controlled the hat and that was terrible, right? Like there's a way it could go that way. But then I think of a game like Luigi's Mansion 3, where Guigi, what a guy, you can play that game fully single player, but also it works co-op, and you can
really
have
good
one
example.
person playing as Guigi as well. And I think, obviously, there were some people who had certain issues with that and how it worked, but for the most part, it seemed like that was a pretty successful endeavor. And I loved Luigi's Mansion 3 just playing a single player.
And if you get the team who have made those incredible 120 shrines from the first game to use that video game developing skill with, you know, two characters in a co-op setting, I think you could create some pretty cool stuff.
I totally think so. Yeah, and just the engine that they have there with what they can do with all the physics and the chemical stuff going on, I think just combining those things together with two people working together to solve a puzzle is one of those things, actually, that Breath of the Wild itself, in some ways, is a co-op game. I remember when Ali T first got the game, I was at his house, and he was going through and you know, going to these different places and doing a shrine, and I was doing a shrine with him, and we were both like kind of spitballing ideas back and forth of like, oh, try this, what if you did that, or maybe do this instead. And it was weirdly cooperative in a way of like just having ideas and trying to figure out like the best approach to a situation. It's actually really fun to play that game in that way, and I think that if you go deeper than that and specifically design it so that people have to solve things cooperatively,
and like we've had such a great time with It Takes Two this year, you know, and just that feeling of co-op. Oh, and it should go without saying that this will be local only. They're not even going to try and do this online.
Let's not be lunatics here, man. Of course, no, here's the thing, Bally. In 3 years' time, they will patch it to be like, here's the update.
During the next pandemic in 3 years' time.
Yeah.
Why don't we patch Breath of the Wild 2 and fix that co-op online?
Oh my god, that fucking Mario Party. I don't think we talked about it on the show, but there's fucking balls on this company to put out a patch for a 2-year-old game and give it online when it should have fucking had it day one. I'm so angry and yet shocked, and kind of now want to play Mario Party, which I don't know if it's a good idea.
That's the worst part of the whole thing. It's like,
that's the worst fucking part. They're gonna get my money.
Maybe want to buy that game. Fine.
I'm sure we'll play that at some point. Anyway, I like it. I don't have any Zelda predictions necessarily. I think we will see it. I think that's pretty obvious. I don't think it will be this year. It's not sounding feasible enough, and I don't also think that they necessarily feel a pressure to release it alongside Switch Pro. I think if they could do it would be nice, but I think they can put that system out before it and be totally fine. And it will be just fine next year when it's ready to go. And that's the thing, right? I feel like this is a game that could have come out already potentially had it not been for COVID stuff, and I think that it's probably got real bad knock-on effects. Like, remember, this was revealed with in-game in-game footage at 2019, you know? Like, it's almost, we're gonna get 2 years ago at this point, which is
right
for a sequel to a game that came out in 2017. It's, you know, it's quite a fast period of time, which obviously we know big Zelda games have a big gap between them, but this is a slightly different situation in that is directly riffing on it. It's using the same art style, imagine the same engine in maybe the same world. We don't know. But, yeah. I'm excited. I'm just stoked to see what this game really is, because we've just been able to guess really at the small kind of. It's interesting. We are getting more of a story focus this time because we haven't really seen any gameplay elements. It's like the only thing we have to go on is like this weird Ganon thing and this head snap and like horror-y elements, and that's kind of it. It's really weird. And
we have to remember that before Breath of the Wild 1, so E3 2016, this was obviously ahead of the Switch launching, right? We didn't even know we didn't know about the Switch then. But Nintendo did one game at E3, and that was Breath of the Wild.
And it blew the fucking doors off. I remember everyone was so mad before that show, and then they come out, and it's like, well, this is the game of the show. No one else is competing.
So when people go, I always saw was Breath of the Wild 2. Like, if we get anything that's beyond just Breath of the Wild 2, we should be grateful because like the way that Nintendo
well, I don't know. Let's maybe not just like crow at the feet of Nintendo in that way, but I know what you mean. I certainly will be satiated if I get that and nothing else, to be sure. So cool. My second prediction, Bally. I'm a Xenoblade fan. You know that. Everyone knows that. I'm a big Xenoblade boy. I dabble in anime. I'm not going to say I am become anime, but I'm dabbling in anime, you know. I feel like Xenoblade 3 is happening, but I don't think it's going to be announced fully. I feel like what we're going to get is we're going to get Tetsuya Takahashi standing on a background, like Anuma was standing on a background. And it's his turn. It's Takahashi's turn to be like, I come to you, I'm sorry, Xenoblade 3 is real, but I can't show you anything about it because COVID fucked us up. Haven't finished it yet. We're still going. However, we know that you Nintendo people, you love these Xeno games. You're all mad for them now. But none of you have probably played our old games, which we made back in the day when Nintendo hadn't bought us as a company. So for the first time on a Nintendo platform, we are going to release the Xeno Collection, a collection of Xenogears and all the Xeno Saga games that came out in the past on non-Nintendo platforms. So Xenogears is one game. Xenosaga, I frankly don't really know because it's very messy, and I looked at Wikipedia and it's like Xenosaga Episode 1, Xenosaga something else with subtitle, Episode 2, another episode with a subtitle. It's a complicated mess.
I'm really surprised you've not tried those games yet because I've
here's the thing. Okay, so
things.
Part of what triggered this prediction in my mind is I've got my new PC now, downloaded RetroArch straight away, started like sideloading emulators in there and everything, and I'm like, yeah, let's get Xenogears. I want to play that, and I tried to boot up Xenogears, and it's just like it wasn't working, and I'm trying to fix it right now. I don't know how to get it working. I feel like I've got an issue somewhere along the line, either the ROM or something. I'm not sure.
Nintendo will fix it for you and charge you £50.
Exactly, and that's what I want, Bally. I don't want to pirate it for free. I'd rather give Nintendo my money. No, it's really annoying because Xenogears specifically is like a cult classic. People talk about Xenogears as like a game that at one point, Xenogears was Final Fantasy VII, right? Like, this is the story of Takahashi and how he left Square Enix and did his own thing. And before that, though, they made Xenogears, which is a Square game. And Xenogears could have been what Final Fantasy VII was, but it ended up being its own thing because the story was too dark or deemed too mature and things like this in some ways. Too edgy, maybe, for what Final Fantasy VII would become. Final Fantasy VII, pretty edgy, let's be honest. Cloud Strife, pretty edgy boy. So it is a kind of piece of history that I have always wanted to play and has eluded me because it was available on the PlayStation 3 in the US but not in Europe, and so I would have had to make a PS3 US account to download it, and that just wasn't that easy because Sony's account systems and stuff are not as fluid as like Nintendo's are these days, where you just make an account, go to a regional store and download it. It just wasn't streamlined in the same way. So even accessing that from my perspective was almost next to impossible. So it's one of those games that I haven't really had the ability to play, and is very rare, obviously physically, back on the PS1. So yeah, it's just kind of sitting there, lost to history. And the Xenosaga games, I know people like are up and down on them. I don't know which ones are good, which ones are bad, etc. But it is a bunch of history, and it's a bunch of stuff that Monolith Soft have worked on that have never been on Nintendo platforms. And I think people would enjoy, especially when you look at stuff like the Grandia HD collection, Legend of Mana just got this remake that's come out on Switch. You know, all these things. It's an RPG machine. It's like a machine for collections of RPGs, like the Saga collection, for God's sake. It's just like a murderer's row of niche weird shit from Japan, and this is like not even super niche. Like it's still pretty well known, not amongst the general audience, but at least amongst the people who pay attention to this type of stuff. So I would love it if they just remade them, because it's, you know, so hard to access those games, you know, like accessibility when it comes to certain games and their historical relevance and things like that. It's something that I like that Xbox is doing with their backwards compatibility, but I feel like other companies are getting there in different ways, you know, like doing collections like Konami have done and Capcom have done with their old franchises. And Nintendo own Monolith Soft, so it shouldn't be too difficult to do it unless there's some weird stuff that historically holds up those licenses, which I hopefully wouldn't be the case. I would love to see that.
Cool.
So
nice.
So yeah,
that would be cool. Yeah, they do like to say, if we don't have news on this game, here's we're re-releasing the old one. Here you go.
Here's a remaster. He's gonna do the exact thing that Anuma did like 3 months ago. He's just gonna be like, I'm gonna do the same thing. Yeah. Which would be fitting because Monolith Soft very much working on The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, which is another reason why I think that Xenoblade 3 probably a little delayed. So.
Right. Well, my third prediction. So, I've had Metroid, had Zelda. You got to have a bit of Mario, right? You got to have all three predictions, the big three. I know that there's a rumor that the Odyssey team is working on the DK game, but I'm going to stick to my guns. I think that they're going to be working on Mario Odyssey 2.
The big boy.
I'm giving this game the billing that it's going to manage to be this year's holiday game. And I know we got the Pokemon remake or anything, but that doesn't really count in my view. Like this is the Nintendo holiday game for 2021. It's going to be Mario Odyssey 2. And it's going to launch on the same day as the Switch Pro. Now here's the thing.
Oh, okay, all right.
This is the Switch Pro launch game. Here's the thing. I think the Switch Pro is going to make us view Nintendo like we've never seen them before. And what I mean by this is like, I think Nintendo are going to do almost like these kind of like behind their back black market press releases that are all about the Switch Pro. And whenever they say that a game comes out, Switch Pro is not going to be marketed in any meaningful way. Like it's just going to come under the Switch umbrella. And any time that any game is mentioned, it's like, yeah, Mario Odyssey 2, yeah, it's coming to Switch. And then when people say, oh, will it run better on Switch Pro? Like the answer to those kinds of questions is in their kind of black market press release. That's what I'm talking about. Like,
okay, all right.
Like Nintendo hate the idea, and I've said this before on the show, like they hate the idea of the Switch Pro. This is them being reluctantly forced to do it. And I think this is another reason that, you know, we're going to hear about the Switch Pro before E3. And anyone who's interested in the Switch Pro, like hardcore Nintendo fans like us, we know our news channels to get information on the Switch Pro. But when it comes to E3, it's not even going to be mentioned. Like I think that we might get a Switch Pro release date when it's revealed in the next few days, if that happens. Let's say like end of October, start of November. And I think that when they announce Mario Odyssey 2, they'll give the release date for the same date. And it'll be on fans like us to be like, oh, that's the same date. It's launching with the Switch Pro. Like, I don't even think Nintendo will publicize Mario Odyssey 2 in that way. Like, it's going to be all separate. So that's like my kind of Switch Pro and Mario Odyssey 2 prediction rolled into one.
In that way, right, you would imagine the Switch Pro not really something to get excited about in terms of a power jump then, right? Like,
I mean, I think you're gonna get your docked 4K and not much else. And
your DLSS, right? Like, as we've all kind of thought is
and
probably
I
the
think
case.
you're still gonna get 30 frames per second. Obviously, Mario Odyssey can probably run at 60. I think that will be exciting, and another reason that it's a good game to launch the Pro with. But Nintendo aren't going to push
keeping in mind that the
aspect.
original Mario Odyssey also ran at 60 on the base Switch.
So, like I said, this isn't an aspect Nintendo are going to push. They might put out, like I said, a black market press release or something. Like this is to the hardcore industry.
Where are these black market press releases going? That's what I want to know.
I'm just trying to explain. Like it's like a 2-tier marketing campaign, and that's that's what I'm trying to get across. And the top tier, which is E3, is not going to focus on Switch Pro at all.
They'll just be like, Mario Odyssey 2 coming to the Nintendo Switch family of systems.
Exactly. They might not even say family of systems. Like, I think like Switch Pro is just a Switch, as is the Switch Lite. It's a Switch, as is the Switch
but all of them together, they're just a nice happy family
just the
of
Switch.
systems.
And then for those who know what the Switch Pro does, then like us, we'll be like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That's the one we're getting kind of thing, because we're the Nintendo hardcore. Like they're not. They have no need to market the Switch Pro to a mainstream, wider audience. Anyone who was interested in the Switch Pro will know about it through their own channels. And
I mean, that would make sense if we think about the rumors saying that they just want this to replace the Switch eventually, right? Like just slowly phase out the old Switch, and this would just become the default
exactly.
Switch.
They can just pull away from that original launch Switch, and all of a sudden the Switch Pro is the only thing, and they might even take the Pro name off it, and that just becomes the Switch, and all marketing will be aligned with that. So, and I also think Mario Odyssey 2, all three of the games I've predicted, I think all three will feature in the Treehouse.
Nice. Yeah,
I think we'll get some good gameplay. And in terms of like the content of Mario Odyssey 2, I really have no idea. I think we're going for like bigger, bolder captures, and that's basically what anyone would want, right? That's the success of that game, isn't it? Like the open areas.
Sure. I think that Nintendo, you see this with a lot of their series, right? Where, especially the ones where they're being a bit experimental, which I think 3D Mario generally is considered, they like to have a new thing there, right? And even if it is as kind of
like Galaxy 2 is Yoshi.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah,
Right.
even if it's like as minor as Yoshi in Galaxy 2, right? There's a differentiating factor, right? Like he got those spicy peppers so he could go fast. That was a new quote unquote thing or mechanic or idea that they leveraged in that game. And I think that they probably would like to do the same thing if they indeed do a sequel to this game.
If they could do like a flood capture, like you're like actually capturing flood, and
or just capturing an older version of Mario from Sunshine and then playing as him.
Yes, and you got to get in the Delfino Plaza Kingdom and have fun there.
Of course, yeah, that's true. Yeah, definitely have to go there.
And again, water going to look glorious, 4K, 60 frames per second, Switch Pro. Mario platforming sounds fantastic.
I have to say, as someone who has now experienced DLSS with a game like Control, I can't fucking tell the difference between real 1440p and fake 1440p. I frankly can't. So I think that as a solution, I think it's going to be really smart and probably get Nintendo the rest of the way there because they don't want to juice their GPU that much, right? Like they definitely have this thing of they don't want to break the bank when it comes to this type of iterative hardware. And I think if they can partner with NVIDIA, which they already are doing, and have their technology carry the load, that's what they're going to do, man. It really makes a lot of sense. Cool. Well, Bally, we're once again at odds here, directly at odds, because I'm going down the train route of the internet rumor mill, and I am going to, jump on this Donkey Kong machine and believe that EPD Tokyo will be making a 3D Donkey Kong game called Donkey Kong World. And when I think about Donkey Kong, right, he is, for Nintendo, their most historic figure. Like you think about the original Donkey Kong arcade game, how iconic that is, and how important that figure is as a piece of Nintendo history. We have the in-jokes about Cranky Kong actually being the original Donkey Kong from the arcade machine, and then Donkey Kong Jr. is the current Donkey Kong, and then people like to go down rabbit holes of like how many fucking Kongs there are and which Kong's related to this Kong, and all of that nonsense. I love it. I love the kind of Nintendo lore speculation of the Kong family. It's a great thing. And obviously Donkey Kong has had success in recent years from Retro's fantastic platformers. But he is really kind of the golden child of Nintendo that isn't Mario, right? Donkey Kong is such an important figure for Nintendo. And so I think with his anniversary and all the stuff going on with that, it's going to be a big celebration of Nintendo as a company with this game. And so I'm thinking of like, where do you go in this Donkey Kong game? What do you do? And it will be a tour through Nintendo history as Donkey Kong. You start in the arcade machine. You go through all these other places, all these different consoles. Maybe in some ways thinking of like what Astrobot did for PlayStation hardware. Like there's a ways in which Nintendo could do that with Donkey Kong and Nintendo hardware. And you can even throw in nods to DK64 out there. You can tip your hat to Rare and what they did, and have maybe locations from that game show up. But I think as a way to celebrate the company as a whole, but also their most iconic, in some ways, most historic icon, Donkey Kong. I think it would be a really cool thing to do. And I actually am really excited by the rumor that they are working on something that isn't Mario Odyssey 2, because I think Mario Odyssey 2 would be fantastic. But that team is so talented. They are so creative. And I feel like they could do something with the Big Ape that has not been done before.
Totally. It's so like Odyssey 2 is so good. Odyssey 1, I should say, is so good because of the ideas in it. If you know that the team behind those ideas are working on something else, regardless of the character Mario, it's going to be fantastic, So whether it's DK or something else, that is the game I'm maybe most excited for, other than Breath of the Wild 2. Like, that is
100%. Whatever they make next, I'm there day one. Of course, it's a given. I think they are, bar none, the most talented team in the games industry. That EPD Tokyo team are just like, they never miss, right? Like, it's just non-stop, banger after banger. And when you think about it, they started out making a Donkey Kong game, right? Their first game was Jungle Beat. And so this is, in a way, coming full circle. So to me, it makes some logical sense.
That will definitely be referenced in this game.
100%. Yeah, definitely. Jungle Beat will be referenced if they do make a Donkey Kong game. And so, yeah, I'm thrilled by the possibility, the prospect. I don't know if these rumors are going to pan out or not. Who knows? We were all so certain there was going to be a Star Fox racing game. Remember that? Everyone was so locked in. It was 100% happening, definitely guaranteed. Never happened, right? So, sure, we can ride these hype trains forever, but ultimately, you can't really predict Nintendo or even know anything that's going on with any certainty inside that company. And so I like the idea. I'm going to go for it for my prediction, but I'm not going to be disappointed if it's wrong and it's Mario Odyssey 2, right? Like, whatever that team does, I'm fine with.
And this is your October, November holiday game?
Yeah, I think so.
And it will be shown off in the treehouse?
Yeah, and if we had a E3 that was traditional, Nintendo's booth would be this game, right? You'd have vines hanging off things, Donkey Kong.
This year. The other stuff I've predicted isn't this year, so
it would be adorning their booth. But yes, I think that would be good. Yeah.
Man, I hope some of our predictions come true.
I know, we make great predictions, man. We have great imaginations for video games. Love it.
Right.
All right, Bal, that's 3 regular predictions. Time to go out there. Time to blow my mind with some nonsense.
Okay, so Smash Brothers.
Smash Brothers.
Just to say, I think Chibi Ridley will be a new costume in Smash Brothers.
What?
That links to my previous prediction, but that's not my silly prediction. Okay. That's a very realistic prediction.
Sure, me costume, yeah, of course.
Chibi Ridley. So everyone's talking about like Master Chief in Smash Brothers, and it's like, oh, maybe what if Master Chief was in Smash? What if Sora was? It's like Master Chief isn't going to be in Smash Brothers. Master Chief is coming to Mario Kart because that makes more sense.
Oh shit!
He's going to bring the Warthog, and I've driven that Warthog in Forza Horizon. It feels good. They know how to make that thing feel good in a driving game, a racing game. They don't have to have these Halo controls, which are all over the shop, and that is going to be Mario Kart reaching its next level. It's opening up not just within Nintendo systems, Nintendo IP, but to say like we're going to have a few Microsoft characters, and Master Chief is going to be the big reveal in the Warthog. And it's just going to be like this jarring thing of him driving around the Mushroom Kingdom, and people are going to go wild for it.
Man, you're jumping the gun on your Smash Mario prediction. He's going the whole hog, man. Just getting every character.
Yeah, I'm kind of giving up on Mario Kart 9. I don't know if that game's ever going to happen.
It feels like loads of people are talking about Mario Kart 9 out of nowhere recently for some reason. It feels like... And that team, right? We think about it. They put out ARMS in 2017... And they haven't fucking done anything since then.
They are also due. They are due. They're definitely
due. They're due to deliver a baby. And it could be Mario Kart 9. I like that idea. Do you think that would be... I feel like as a reveal, it would just be showing off Master Chief, right? But alongside... Do you think it would be similar to like Snake and Brawl, right? Where like they show the regular Nintendo people, and then at the end, in he comes on the Warthog, right?
Yeah. And when you think about Mario Kart crossovers, like we have had Link, F-Zero, we've had Mercedes, like...
God, I forgot about the fucking Mercedes shit.
As wild as Master Chief is, it's not like Nintendo have been a million miles away from something like this, it's not overly crazy, but still crazy enough where I think it would create a lot of internet hype, just like Master Chief coming. And like, I think it's in Microsoft's interest to promote Halo and Master Chief with Infinite coming out likely this autumn. So, you know, it's Nintendo could be a platform to do that, even if he's not in Smash Brothers.
Yeah, I think so. Mario Kart 9 is a idea that, you know, is real in many senses, because what else would that team do? I mean, ARMS 2 is theoretical, but do they really want to do that? I feel like it has to be something like that, right? I don't see an entire generation, although it's the best fucking selling game on the entire system. I can't see a generation where they don't make a new Mario Kart, right? Like, they got to make a new Mario Kart.
You can't, like, as well as it's sold in Mario Kart terms. In Mario Kart 8 Deluxe terms, it has slowed down, right? Like, it's not selling at the same rate it was back in 2017-18, surely, right? Like,
I don't know. I honestly have no idea. Maybe it has. That's a scary thing. It's terrifying.
Yeah, that is terrifying. But regardless of how well it's selling now, can another one not just sell well too? You know, like, it just...
I think, realistically, your idea and what a lot of people have been saying with the Smashification, right, is that separates it enough, right? Like, that distinguishes it as a splinter game that that stands alongside it, right? As opposed to competing directly with it. And so there is benefit in buying both, theoretically, from Nintendo's perspective. You also think about it of like, all right, Nintendo, I know you probably want to sell like as many copies as you possibly can of Mario Kart 8, and you don't necessarily want to slow that down at any point, but like, fucking hell, guys, you sold like fucking over 30 million of this thing, right? And that's pretty good, right? Like, do you really need to worry that much about it? And I don't think they do, really.
No.
So,
who knows?
Fingers crossed. We'll see.
Right, Nbz,
okay.
Final one from you.
My final one. I've written down 3 words, and this is the only thing I've written down. I haven't really thought that much about it, but I just came into my brain. The 3 words I've written down is Nintendo versus Capcom. There we go.
Wow.
Done.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. So history of Capcom doing fighting game crossovers with different companies. You've got Tatsunoko on Wii. You've got, obviously, Marvel versus Capcom is the most famous one. But it feels like Capcom are in a renaissance period, right? Like, they are banging out Resident Evil games. Monster Hunter's on top of the world. They're putting out the Phoenix Wright game that was Japan exclusive, the Great Ace Attorney in the West Valley.
Yeah, that is a lot of Capcom right there. Yeah,
I'm so excited. I'm fucking stoked. It's really cool. And so I think that Nintendo and Capcom can get together and make a beautiful thing, which is to do a fighting game that features Nintendo characters and Capcom characters in a more traditional setting, fighting game wise, than you get with Smash Brothers, right? And so you're not going to get Phoenix Wright in Smash, but you will get Phoenix Wright versus Mario, because he will be in a Capcom fighting game, of course, and he has been in the past. He's been in, I believe, Marvel vs. Capcom or Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, one of those few. And the Monster Hunter guy as well will be in there as well. Like, this is Capcom kind of making up for the fact that they couldn't get all their characters into Smash Brothers. The DLC is ended, and they're like, look, we need to have Link versus Monster Hunter guy. We just got to do it ourselves this time, right? And so that's what's going to happen. And to me, it feels like it's possible, just because Nintendo feel these days like a company who are more willing to lend out their IP, or at least work more directly with other companies with their IP. Mario plus Rabbids was a thing that was super successful, and I just want them to do more of that stuff, right? Just get out there and be confident in allowing other people, especially, company like Capcom, who they have definitely done a lot of business with in the past, the old Zelda games that they worked on and all that stuff. It seems viable and fun, and it's one of those things where I think Nintendo have a big enough name and cachet to where you wouldn't just get fighting game fans playing this game, right? I would probably pick this game up, and I think it's potential for them to have a fighting game that breaks through in a bit of a bigger way for that series that Capcom has.
I think even if we don't see something like that this year, it could be where Nintendo goes next after Smash Brothers for the time being. If, like, I think the rumors like Sakurai might retire, and
Yeah.
God, he needs it, and
Boy, yeah.
this
he
could be
does.
like an exciting next thing to do with Nintendo and fighting games,
Yeah, and I would just love to see a different company's take on the style of Nintendo characters, right? Like, especially when you look at those MVC games and the way that they visualize even characters like Mega Man and stuff like that. It's totally different from like what you expect of the traditional look of Mega Man. And I think Smash Brothers does a great job of translating those classic character looks. Like, you look at the Belmonts and Mega Man and all these other Sonic, Pac-Man, they're all so lovingly rendered in ways that make you remember them fondly of like what they actually looked like in their games, even though they're all 8-bit things back in the day. But those games from Capcom feel like they have much more of a style to them and a different angle. And so like seeing Mario or Samus or somebody rendered in that particular kind of graphical rendering would be really neat, and I think it would be exciting. So
cool.
Never gonna happen, but I think this is my wild prediction.
That's
That's what we're saying.
prediction.
So why it's out there and fun. So there we go. Those are our predictions. Anything that we haven't talked about that we want to, maybe bring up as possibilities?
Why don't we dive into some listener predictions, and we can just extrapolate from some of those.
Sounds good
areas
to
we've
me.
not covered yet. Right. Our
Excellent.
first message on Discord is from Doodlehand, who I believe is CRM Doodle, says,
Yeah.
we will get trailers for Prime 4, Breath of the Wild 2, a new 2D Mario, a new F-Zero, and 2 new Smash characters. Well, that's a lot.
That's wishful thinking, man. That sounds like the best E3 I've ever seen in my life, and I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think we get diddly squat on Prime 4, honestly.
No, I agree. I think Prime 4 continues to be absent and doesn't, no update at all. They don't even discuss
there's
it.
Too much in between, and the main one being Breath of the Wild 2, obviously, and then we disagree on what's coming in November, but like I think there's something new in November or October, to fill that slot in and around Switch Pro. So yeah, we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
George64 says, I'll throw some curveballs as I think we'll get some of the rumored Zelda things. So we'll get a side-scroller Splatoon game, a new Dead Cells game shown, Mario Kart 9 trailer, story mode, and planes are the big push, and a multiplayer Zelda game in the Link's Awakening engine.
Triforce Heroes follow-up, maybe.
I want more Triforce Heroes whenever that comes. But I think my idea can play on some of those co-op ideas for sure. Like Breath of the Wild 2, but
potentially. That's the thing we didn't talk about with Breath of the Wild 2. Like Triforce Heroes, there is this co-op Zelda game that already exists that they made, right? Like, and it's pretty good. Yeah,
that is playable with fewer than 3 players, although it is a bit janky when you have to do that, to be honest. But I mean, maybe this is the thing, right? We're like, well, they're not going to do online for Breath of the Wild 2. Maybe it's good that they don't do online, because the online setup in Triforce Heroes was fucking trash. It was not good. That was my biggest issue with that game, was the setup. Considering it was like the whole game, it's a bit frustrating that was.
Yes, it was indeed. It was indeed. But yeah,
side scroller Splatoon. I love that idea.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I've always wanted a spin-off Splatoon game, and my prediction from a couple of years ago, Splat Walk. Where's the fashion game? Splatoon Splat Walk.
I'm a little shocked we're potentially getting Splatoon 3 before spin-off. Like, I'm kind of shocked they've not tried a spin-off yet.
I agree. I totally, and I think that the fact that they've announced Splatoon 3 says to me that you won't get a Splatoon side-scroller 2D type thing anytime soon. I think we're probably going to have to wait until after the big game comes out for more from that franchise, unfortunately. But I like the thought for sure.
Yeah. Hawks Bill says Metroid 2 re-release onto Switch with a bonus pinball mode.
Well, here's the thing, Val. This is the real sobering thought, is that he's hit the nail on the head, which is that instead of a Super Metroid remake, instead of a new 2D Metroid, they just fucking port the 3DS game and just like tack on
just
bonus
give it a glow
thing.
up. It's a great game. I mean, 2017 wasn't that long ago. But I don't know. Yeah,
they put out fucking Miitopia, for fuck's sake. God damn it, Nintendo. I hate you.
All other arguments are invalid now.
Oh, God.
Tim says, not so much a prediction as a hope, with Silk Song already confirmed not at E3. The only news I really want is anything about Fire Emblem. I think that could go one of 3 ways. One, a remake launching soon, like with Echoes, announced February 2017, released May 2017. My personal choice would be FE4, but any would be great. Option 2, the next big game, but still a ways off. Three Houses revealed at E3 2018, but not released until July 2019. This would also be fantastic, even if it's a ways off. I think they would use the same engine as Three Houses, but the game would be completely new. I don't think it's possible to do a sequel. And then option 3, a spin-off like Warriors or #FE, which I really do not want.
Yeah, let's talk about Fire Emblem Bally. I didn't give a Fire Emblem prediction, but I think it's certainly a thing that is likely to show up at E3. Three Houses came out in 2019, right? So it's been 2 years since that. It feels like that's around the time when you announce a new one, if it's going to come the year after. The question is, who's making it? Is it Tecmo Koei with the Intelligent Systems name on it, even though only 3 people from Intelligent Systems worked on it? Is it a full Intelligent Systems team? I think part of the reason Three Houses happened was because Intelligent Systems was also making Origami King, Paper Mario, right?
Of course, right.
So unless they have multiple teams within Intelligent Systems who are working on Paper Mario simultaneously with Fire Emblem, then it seems like it could be another Tecmo game that is supported by Intelligent Systems, which in that case would either make sense to be, one, a remake, as Tim mentioned, of Fire Emblem 4, because FE4 and Three Houses share a lot of DNA in terms of the type of game they are.
And just use that engine again.
Yeah, you reuse the engine, but just do a remake of that old game. Or a sequel to Three Houses, set in the same world, but maybe with different characters and stuff like that. Fire Emblem has a tradition of usually doing 2 games within a setting and then moving on. The only example of a game that is standalone in the franchise outside of Three Houses currently is Sacred Stones. Sacred Stones is the only game that takes place in that setting. Every other Fire Emblem game, there's at least 2 games that take place in the setting that it's set in. And then there's a possibility, of them doing something totally different that isn't set in the Three Houses world, that is a brand new setting that is made by Intelligent Systems, that isn't a Tecmo Koei joint. And I would kind of like to see that third one, personally. I want to see a new Fire Emblem game that... I've said for a while, I would love to see what if they went to space, Fire Emblem, gave them lightsabers and laser guns instead, and did a futuristic setting for this series. I think it would be a really interesting change of pace and just allow them to approach it in a different way. And maybe that would just not be Fire Emblem anymore. But I think if you want to revitalize the series in some way, which they clearly don't need to because it's on a high right now, I would love to see that type of thing. But... don't think that is going to happen. I think we'll probably just get a different setting. Maybe they lean in more to the Persona stuff. I was thinking, what if it was a bit more focused on high school, and that stuff is what Three Houses is in a way, but they could go further with it. There's ways in which they could make it more of a core focus, because I do think, especially, this is the reason I think you fell off of Three Houses, was the month calendar system of running around the cathedral and doing all your little bits and tasks.
Yeah. Fire Emblem is already, for me, quite an intense game, and a lot of systems, and that game just threw in a whole other level of systems that took more learning, more time to physically do in the game, just kind of, I wasn't overly intrigued by the story as much as it was building to some interesting things, but it just wasn't quite my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Can we touch quickly on Tim's point about Silk Song being confirmed not at E3? This was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think. Really shocking. I really thought this could have been a slot. Nintendo show off Silk Song.
I know.
Launch, I don't know, October, end of summer, whatever. Quite surprised. I'm skeptical that the game's going to make this year now. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, let it cook, man. Let it cook. I hope that game is fantastic. I'm sure it will be, as long as they give it the time in the oven. And looking at the gameplay, I rewatched that trailer, and they showed off gameplay of this game at Nintendo's E3 in 2019. Actual, playing through a space as Hornet. And let me tell you, Hornet's movement, all that shit, it's way more up my alley than Hollow Knight's movement, just the traditional game, which I love that game. I think it is just phenomenal. But I'm all about movement in games, and a game that is as well designed as Hollow Knight, that has movement that is faster and more Ori-esque, is like, oh boy, that's getting close to like all-timer status for me. You
Maybe
know?
a little less combat focused, a bit more movement focused. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. Again, that's one of those things that I prefer about Ori to Hollow Knight is the platforming stuff. And if they
really cool.
double down a bit more on that with Silksong, I'm totally in.
Yeah.
So,
cool.
yeah.
Our next Discord message was from Matraya, who says, "This is one of the few times where I have a feeling Nintendo will actually show quite a lot. I think they will start by revealing the penultimate character for Ultimate and close with a trailer for Breath of the Wild 2. In between, I'm feeling the unveiling of a Fire Emblem game, a new Donkey Kong platformer, and if I'm really pushing it, a new Monolith Soft project, most likely Xenoblade 3. Zany prediction, an ARMS sequel with a lore-heavy RPG story mode."
Now, that would be a thing that would make me buy ARMS too, right? Like
that would be cool, because I love the characters in that world. I just wasn't overly keen on the gameplay, right? Like it was,
yeah.
You know, it was cool. I think we had like a weekend where we did the free thing, but it just wasn't. I don't know, just didn't click.
I enjoyed it. I think like it's a competent and well-made game. It's just, it feels like the depth is lacking there, or at least the longevity of wanting to keep playing it is lacking. You know, it didn't feel like it had a learning curve that I was super into understanding, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Final one. Sorry, Jackpot is keeping the faith. Mario Kart 9 is announced and has a release date before the end of the fiscal year.
Yes. I think that's definitely likely.
Likely? You're going Mario Kart 9 is likely this fiscal year?
I mean, if it is announced, then it is likely to be before the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, I agree if it's announced.
Big if. Great. We also had some predictions sent in on Twitter. At LozVGC has given us 3 categories of predictions. We've got realistic predictions, mild predictions, and wild predictions. So let's start with realistic. Breath of the Wild sequel trailer, new Smash Fighter reveal, Metroid news of some sort. Really not committing to here. Metroid news of some sort. Pokemon remakes at the Treehouse. That's likely. I feel like we'll see the Diamond and Pearl
Good
remakes.
point, yeah. Unfortunately, that will take up a Treehouse slot.
Unfortunately, it will take up 40 minutes of Treehouse time of those 3 hours. Yes, so true. Big Animal Crossing update. We didn't talk about that, but I think Nintendo are very lacking in terms of their support for that game, right? Like after the
last big one was the Mario stuff, right?
Yeah, I think so. It hasn't been much of a bump since then. I don't know if they want to keep supporting it. Yeah. They should. It's the best-selling fucking game of the last year.
Are we going to get the Zelda stuff, the Star Fox stuff, the other Nintendo stuff, or you know, I don't know,
or just like events or like stuff that is more, you know, direct and different. Honestly, what it feels like is Nintendo basically took out all the seasonal events to make them things that just happen that everyone does via the online download stuff, and then after that they were like, well, we're just going to repeat those every year and we're not going to change anything. You know, it's like it was exciting in the first year where it's like, oh, now it's this and now it's this, and now it's just back to regular. It's like, oh no, they're in the game now, this is just what a year in Animal Crossing is, and we're going to drop the ball now. But next one, new Monolith Soft game, either new IP, export, or Xenoblade 3, and then a new amiibo to sell out before the direct is even over, which is probably the most accurate prediction on this entire show.
Breath of the Wild 2 related, I will give that amiibo.
Yes, that could definitely happen. Imagine if they did an amiibo of the fucking horror Ganon dead body. Like, that would be a fucking amiibo.
Well, I think they're going to do an amiibo with Link and Zelda on the same horse.
Ooh, yeah. That would be nice.
That's going to be the one.
I might buy that amiibo. Who am I kidding? I'm never buying another amiibo. The only amiibo I will ever buy is if I see the QB amiibo, Box Boy, on sale. I'll buy that one. But that's just because I love QB. He's great. Mild predictions from Los VGC are Zelda 35th bundle of N64 Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I love how he clarifies the N64 version of Ocarina and Majora and not the 3DS one with all the improvements that are much better. Yeah. I feel like those we'll get a collection. There'll be Zelda 35th stuff happening for sure. New Donkey Kong game, new 2D Metroid / remake, 2 Smash Fighter reveals, Fire Emblem remake, and new Mario Party game. And then the wild predictions, Zelda 35th bundle of the 3DS Ocarina and Majora's Mask, given that Miitopia facelift, Metro Prime 4 trailer, Bayonetta 3 trailer and release date, Nintendo All-Stars Pinball with Nintendo franchise-related themes. That's a fun one.
I like that.
And Breath of the Wild sequel release date. So yeah, really running the gamut there of like this is my when I'm happy, when I'm sad, and when I'm mad kind of predictions, right? That's a good stack there.
Do you think we're getting to one Smash character?
Yeah, I like the idea of 2. I like it, but I think that
Finish with 2.
Nintendo likes to end with a bang, and we're midway through the year. I think Game Awards is going to be their final hurrah. They want to save it.
Is the final bang crazy cross-party, or is it beloved Nintendo character?
I think Nintendo, knowing them and how they fuck things up, the last one will be a boring pick that no one will care about, and the second to last one will be the big one. I feel like the E3 one is going to be a big one.
Right.
That's my thought.
Do you think they go more cross-party with the second last one? I think we might be due like a cross-party one.
Well, we're not due fucking anything. There's no patterns, Bally. Everyone tries to make patterns out of these reveals. There are none. It doesn't exist. It's all made up. Nintendo do what they like. Oh, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Cool. We have one from Sean from the Game for All show. Shout out to Sean. He says, reasonable, new 3D Super Mario teased or Odyssey 2. And wild, Nintendo VR announced featuring a new Pokemon Stadium and Link's crossbow training. Now, Link's crossbow training, a classic video game. Connoisseurs will remember on the Wii the peripheral that came along with it. I played it at Ali T's house, and it was good fun. I enjoyed Link's crossbow training. I think that's actually probably one of the best ideas for a VR Nintendo game, frankly. Because I don't know what other franchises they have that really work with VR.
Metroid Prime.
Yeah, Metroid for sure. Not that many first-person games. Pokemon Snap, right? Pokemon Snap.
Here's the thing, though. Having played stuff like Astro Bot, like third-person action-adventure platformers or whatever, I think look great in VR. And I don't think anyone should be scared of going... You don't have to reinvent the wheel just because you're making a VR game all the time, honestly, in my view. But I know that not everyone agrees with that sentiment.
Yeah. And then a final one from Yesley. Wesley says, news on what Monolith is working on. Xenoblade Warriors, which I
love
think
that idea.
is
very
probably the smartest and most realistic prediction I've heard today. That's a great shout.
Yeah.
Wario Land, either new game or collection of the past. Hey, collection, I would take that. That
would be nice.
Smash reveal for the last 2 characters. One will be all right, the other disappointment.
That's very likely. One will be good, one will be disappointing.
And a small, interesting third-party game. So Yesley and Wesley, what name? Has I think just brought every good prediction to the show, and we should just retire as host, Bally. I think he's going to take over. It's good stuff. I think, man, they fucking love Warriors games, don't they? They've just fucking...
They love them. They absolutely love them.
And I really don't love them. I really don't. So it makes it hard as a Nintendo fan that Nintendo are like, but what if we made all our franchises Warriors games? That'd be good. Yeah, weird stuff. Anything that has not been covered, either by these people who have written in or by us, Bally, that you have a burning desire to discuss about Nintendo's E3 this year?
If Silk Song's not there, I'd love for a big indie to be there, but I'm not sure what quite makes the billing for...
Axiom Verge 2, I mean, it got delayed.
Yeah, I think that's probably the next biggest one if they wanted to highlight an indie, and I think that's got a decent shot at this year, so... Yeah, I think that's a good chat.
Any old Nintendo franchises coming back? Are they finally gonna give Ice Climbers their day in the sun or in the snow? Should we say? I'd love to see that. I think like bringing back old stuff has been something they've done in different ways. Obviously, Famicom Detective Club this year is just a remake, but I'd love to see a new one of those, and
I just hope they do it. Like, I don't really mind what the franchise is. Obviously, I'd love Advance Wars F-Zero, the usual, but just do it for something. I'd just love it when they do it and bring a new Nintendo light on something and reinvent it in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, John from Nintendo Life has been harping on about Takamaro's Ninja Castle recently. Did a really good video on that game.
Okay, yeah.
And you know, that's a franchise that Nintendo have basically forgotten. I mean, they've kept the light going in certain niche ways. You know, he's assist trophy. He's in Nintendo Land. You know, he's out there in small ways, but Nintendo don't have like a cool ninja stealth game type of deal. So that would be neat. But
definitely.
Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps us up, covers a lot of bases. I'm looking forward to it, man. We're getting close now, only a couple of weeks, and or a week by the time this goes up. Jesus, it's going to be it's good times, I think. And I don't want to like get overly excited that we're going to get the world, because that will always disappoint you when it comes to Nintendo stuff. I kind of stopped doing that a long time ago. I'm just going to watch it and enjoy it, and hopefully get some cool stuff. Looking forward to it.
And we should say, like, we will put out like a reactions pod like we normally do, and then we'll probably have a longer decompress in the next regular show as well. So where we'll go over our predictions.
It's one of those. It doesn't usually happen this way. Usually we are putting out this episode right before E3 because the timings have worked out differently. This year E3 is falling right in the middle of our two shows. So it's definitely a bit more convenient in some senses, and we'll be able to go through all the stuff, talk about it again. So Nintendo show is happening on Tuesday the 15th at 5 p.m. UK time, which is 9 a.m. Pacific. That's their usual slot for E3. We will, of course, watch it. Maybe we'll watch a bunch of Treehouse stuff, see how much of that we can watch, and then
depending on what's there.
Depending on what's there, and then we'll do a reaction podcast, and we'll get that up ASAP. For everybody to listen to. So that will be the next thing in your feed, hopefully, will be our reactions to Nintendo's E3 presence. So look forward to it. Cool. Well, let's wrap this thing up, Bally. We, of course, have a lot of people to thank for supporting the show. Our patrons on patreon.com/thisnintendolife, where people can go and support us. And we had a new patron recently.
Yes, thank you to our new patron, Spencer G. Thank you so much for your support, but also thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S., Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and my fiancée Caroline. Thank you for your $10 tier support, and thank you to all of our patrons. It's hugely appreciated. Obviously, with our podcast, this non-Tendo Life, we will be covering lots of non-Tendo stuff at E3. Might even do a couple of bonus shows for Xbox and PlayStation over on that feed, as it were. So definitely check that out.
Yep, $1 a month gets you access to exclusive podcasts where we talk about not Nintendo video games, where I will basically just be telling you how good my new PC looks, essentially.
Nbz has been playing 20 minutes of every single PC game under the sun, and you can hear about all of them over on that show. Yep,
absolutely. It's been a good time. Fantastic. You can obviously find the show all across the world on different places. We're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher, we're on iTunes, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on any pod-catching app you have. You can just search for This Nintendo Life and you should find us and download us and review us. Please review us, that'd be nice. We appreciate any and all reviews that people give the show. Helps people find it and all that other stuff. And you can also find us on the internet where we talk about things sometimes, such as twitter.com, a hellscape that we cannot escape from. I am at Lord NBZ on Twitter. How about you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91, BALLYMAN91. I must say I'm a little bit distracted right now because I can spot like someone in the flat opposite me like playing... I think it's Spider-Man Miles Morales, like on their TV, and I can see it.
Okay.
They've got a big screen. I'm just watching them play.
Shit, dude. Wow, this is going to become a new segment. What is the person in the house opposite you playing? We just have to check in every time now. Hopefully they're playing video games.
But you see, people have such big TVs these days that you can really see what people watch from like a very long way away.
Yeah, it's not like... See, the thing I always love to do is if there was a kid on the train playing a DS, I would always like try to position myself to like see, okay, what the fuck is this kid playing on this DS, right? Or even sometimes playing a Vita. I saw a Vita once. I was like, holy shit, someone's playing a Vita in real life? What is this? This thing doesn't even exist in the game space. Most people don't even know what it is. But
we saw someone playing a train. This is ages ago before COVID.
Playing a train?
Pardon?
Playing a train?
Playing a train. Playing a Switch on a train.
Yes.
We were traveling to a wedding, and there's this little kid playing, like, I think it was Mario Odyssey. And
Okay.
I don't know how we got in a conversation with him, but we did. This kid was
Nice.
must have been like 11. And then Caroline's like, "Oh, have you played Zelda Breath of the Wild?" And he's like, "Yeah, I played half an hour and I really didn't like it." And I was like, "Kid, you're not doing
Sort your life out, kid. What are you doing?"
Kudos for playing a Mario Odyssey. I'm glad you're enjoying that, but you got to get those bread and butter games in.
Oh boy. Well, there you go. Cool. Well, that is going to do us for the show. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back, as we said, next week with some E3, baby. So look forward to it. Get hype, and we'll see you very soon. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was Sunset from Famicom Detective Club, The Girl Who Stands Behind. Copyright Nintendo 2021.